Okay, great. So, hello and welcome to the Wholeness Wisdom Podcast, where we talk about the intersection between science, spirituality, and how the wisdom of each can contribute to an awakening of oneself or true nature. And we aim here to offer people ways to implement this knowledge so they can come to their own conclusions. So, we have a special guest today who I announced last episode briefly, and I know him as a teacher to a wide range of audiences, specifically about quantum physics, but I know he's a leader in many ways. So I consider David an expert in his field of knowledge. But welcome, David.
Great to be with you, Erin, as
Hey,
always.
so good to have you here. And I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, specifically, like who are you and how long have you been on a seeking journey or a spiritual journey? But before this, I'd like to just before we talk about anything spiritual, I really respect David's use of working definitions, extremely important, because unless we have a
Operational
shared,
definitions, yeah,
oh,
really
yes,
important.
yes,
So just
operational.
briefly, I'm interested in lots of stuff. Most of my life was spent as a tutor for the SAT and ACT, and I did really well with that. I grew up autistic, and that was part of my seeking, Erin, because I kind of knew, and this is how quantum physics is so beautiful. I kind of knew that I wasn't a noun. I didn't realize that was a verb, you see. And so when I would tell the truth as best I could, nobody believed me. And when I lied, people seemed to believe me. So it was a very strange upbringing, but not a bad one.
Oh, oh,
So I think that's enough of an introduction.
okay,
Go
that's
on for the half hour, but that's not worth it. Right now, I live, as you know, right outside of Asheville. I have a wonderful partner with me who is a wonderful human being. You've met her. And my life is wonderful, and there's all kinds of things that are just jumping up for me to do. So I hope to live to 100 if I'm blessed.
oh, we would all be blessed too if you did. I know you have so much that you share with the world. And before we go into anything using the word spiritual, let's have this operational definition. And
Yes, and let me explain the importance of an operational definition because it's huge. Part of the problem we have with everybody fighting with each other politically and religiously and culturally and every other way is that we don't agree on a specific definition for this moment. If we do that, 90% of the fighting wouldn't happen. So an operational definition is used very much in social science, and I've taught sociology, to try to like everybody agrees on this is what we're measuring. Because of course in social science everything is so vague. What are we talking about? What's schizophrenia, for example? And so the word spirituality, as you know, Aaron, can be used in 1,000 different ways. So let's for now just consider spirituality to be everything that isn't material, whether it exists or not. Whatever is not material that may or may not exist is spiritual, which means that you can agree it doesn't exist at all, or if it does exist, it's what's not physical. Now, of course, you can get into what physical is, but that would take the whole half hour. So
yes,
I hope that'll work for now.
that
It's
works
something
for
that
me.
isn't physical, okay? It isn't like, this desk, this kitchen, okay?
Excellent. That works for me. That works for
Yeah.
me. Yes.
The
Anything
simpler the
beyond,
better.
the simpler the better. I
Yeah.
completely agree on that. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so given that definition, how has your journey as a spiritual seeker, I don't know if that even would apply to you, how has that influenced your understanding of quantum mechanics? And do you
Well,
see overlap?
I started studying quantum physics because of the end of my spiritual search. Um, it's kind of like that most of the time I'm there and there's no me and there's just the speaking that comes through me. It's not all the time because I'm human. And if you talk to Beverly, she'll go into great detail about just how human I am. But um, so um, it ended when there was a real understanding with my last teacher that I am only ever always here, and there was a tremendous freedom that comes with this, which exists more than 50% of the time. That's all I can say, and I don't judge it whether it's 51% or 99%. Who cares?
Mhm.
There's the human side of occasionally having the alleged past and the alleged future actually affect me. But that doesn't happen all that often, and it kind of goes very quickly, so it's nice.
Hmm. by 50% of the time, if most
More than
people,
50% of the
more than
time.
50%
To
of the
me,
time.
that's in other words, you know how people say they're enlightened, which or they say that I can't explain that I'm enlightened because if I say it, you won't believe me, or all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Well, here's a simple operational definition, Aaron, if you want.
Yes, please.
If you're totally completely in love with the present moment without any qualifications and without any thoughts that affect it, I mean thoughts come,
Mhm.
that's close enough to enlightened for me personally.
Oh, I would absolutely agree. I would
And when you're
absolutely agree.
there, then there's no seeking. Can you see that? Because you're
Absolutely.
here. Where else can you be?
Absolutely. Right. There's nothing else. You're
Right.
here.
So that the seeking ends.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And so for people who maybe haven't really gone through a whole search from your own experience, um, aside from this teacher who really kind of finalized it for you or clarified it for you, did you have anything leading up to that point that you were
Oh,
doing?
yeah. I think for most people, there's a term called fierce grace.
Fierce
So
grace.
without going into detail, which would take again way more than a half hour, fierce grace
Mm.
happened to me. So it knocked me on my ass. And at some point, I had to let go of some ideas. And one of the main ideas was that in some ways I was special. And one of the things, Aaron, that's absolutely crystal clear to me is that I am no better and no worse than anybody. And if that's something that your listeners can hear and relate to, that itself is kind of a mini revelation, a mini awakening.
Extremely, extremely useful to come to that conclusion. I am no better nor any worse than
Yeah,
anyone.
so you don't worry about like, okay, yeah, it makes life a lot easier.
Yeah,
And you
because
stop comparing yourself to anybody, which of course, as you know, gets you into all kinds of problems.
exactly the end of comparison is that is heaven in my my experience. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, lovely. So you got to kind of this point where you had to reckon with some of those ideas.
Yeah,
Mhm. All right, so that we're moving right along. It's very, very nice. In both spirituality, which you defined as, that which is not physical,
yeah, whatever that means.
whatever that means, we don't need to know.
Yeah,
And quantum physics as you know it.
yeah.
Well, consciousness is often discussed in these areas, both spirituality and quantum physics science realms.
Hmm.
And so it's often described as this pivotal force that is not yet understood.
Yes,
So
and that
what's your
brings in our common person that we appreciate, Bernardo Kastrup, who
yes.
to me has connected science and spirituality as well or better than anybody that I know on the planet.
Absolutely, for me too. So,
Yeah.
through your what you've learned, where you are today, what is your viewpoint on the larger collective consciousness, if any, or others' consciousness and individual consciousness? So, what's your perspective
Well,
on those?
yeah. It's like in the book that we talked about, More Than Allegory, which we both highly recommend. He makes it very clear and it crystallizes stuff I kind of knew. So I have one page I want to read a bit from because that'll help to get us going.
Great.
So quantum physics, okay, is something that people think that they can't understand. And I think that unless you have some kind of a quote spiritual, meaning not just physical viewpoint, you can't understand it. But the way that Bernardo puts it here really crystallizes it. Physicists have known experimentally since the 1980s that the reality we perceive with our five senses isn't really definite and concrete until we observe it.
Mm.
Now, there's been gazillions of stuff written about that, but he expressed it just beautifully. Before observation, and here's the point that's exciting to me, it consists of vague, ambiguous possibilities. So, for those who know nothing about quantum physics, consider it a world of possibilities.
Mm.
It almost sounds like a little kid going to Disney, like the Imagineering and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
It's a world of possibilities, and that's why we cannot measure it with a physical framework. Possibilities cannot be measured physically. If you
Mm.
have a friend that's saying, Aaron, I want to get together with you and your husband tomorrow night, but we're not sure, isn't that a possibility?
Absolutely.
But
Cannot
how
be
can you
measured.
measure it, right?
Cannot be
It's
measured.
it's immeasurable. Either you're going to go or you won't, but you don't know. And that's how this whole world is.
Mm.
That what Kastrup has demonstrated in the last part of this book is that it could be quadrillions of worlds. There's just no limit to how many worlds exist now and here.
Mm.
And so the other part of this, the understanding that there's only this moment, is so counterintuitive to the human experience that I don't expect most people to believe it, you know?
Mhm.
But as you know, because you've studied this, you know that when you say, I'm making, my husband and I are going to be meeting with my friends X and Y Tuesday, you know that that's only now. You see, you know that. But you can, how can you explain that to somebody who still thinks in terms of time being somehow all encompassing? You can't.
Oh, right, right. And that is one of the points of this podcast is to just come back again and again to just practical ways we can investigate that time really only being now. Because
Yeah,
in the
and I wouldn't
first,
use the word, yeah, yeah, investigate is good. I would say you can't practice. You see, part of the end of the path is that there's no practicing anymore. What are you
yes,
practicing?
right.
You know, my little poem I think I've shared with you, Liberation Simple. It turns out just to be complete death of the project of
Mm.
trying to be me.
Oh, I love it. I love
You
it. It
see?
is
And that's part of
absolutely
the death of the belief in time and space.
yes, yes.
Because you can't try to be you, Aaron. You're already you. How can you try to be you? It's impossible.
It is such good news that really we don't
Yeah,
need
it's like I'm already me. Great.
exactly.
I
I
don't
don't
have
need
to
to
do
look
anything, do I?
exactly. I don't need to look for myself.
Exactly. There's no looking. And who is that that's looking for yourself? Somebody else? Talk about operational definitions. What is the
Ah,
operational definition for somebody who's looking for themselves? Who is that? And
that
who's
is,
the self?
I'm so glad you brought operational definition into the quest for oneself
Yeah.
because it really, that's really what one is doing is asking, how do I define that? How can I define that and find out
And
there
how
is,
can that definition be exactly the same, even for you and your husband, or for me and Bev, or for, no matter how close we are? We still have different operational definitions of ourselves and reality. We can only approximate. That's all we can do.
yes, yes. And this piece of time or present, present versus past versions or future versions, it is so integral to this investigation because I think using time as an almost entry to this, the exploration of time and what that
But
is.
don't forget, forgive me, don't forget it's space. It's
Oh,
really time
yes.
space. It's one thing, time space.
Yes.
Because if you and I agreed at, oh, 11 o'clock, we're going to meet at, cafe in Weaverville, I mean, you can't have 11 o'clock without the cafe in Weaverville. It's meaningless. You
Ah,
see? You get
yes,
that? It's so
absolutely.
simple, really.
Absolutely.
How can you have
Absolutely.
time without space? And how can you have space without time? And now
Absolutely.
in quantum physics, we know that the two are not the be all and end all of the world. As a
Right.
matter of fact, Donald Hoffman, among others, has investigated synchronicities beyond time space, mathematical symbols
Mhm.
that exist beyond time space, which is pretty
Exactly.
mind-blowing.
Exactly. Right. So time and space and as an emergent property of
Yes, the word
something
emerge
more,
is good. And
more
the easy way to
fundamental.
think about that from, say, a mom is that a baby emerged from your womb. you know,
Mhm.
but the baby didn't exist until it emerged, no matter how real he or she is today. You
Oh,
see?
that is
And
a
at some
really
point, it's
good
going to
metaphor.
unemerge, which is part of what we call death.
Yes, yes, yes. They're dissolved back into the fundamental stratum.
Yeah.
So has this changed, your perspective on time and the present and space, and this understanding through Bernardo's work, Hoffman's work, and everyone
And
else?
quantum physicists
Quantum
work.
physics.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Specifically this. How has that changed your experience of individuals or relation? Because I know you and
Yeah.
I met kind of on this topic.
So one of the things is I really am not trying as I used to for so much of my life to try to convince anybody of anything, A, and
Mm.
B, to try to tell anybody anything. When I was a counselor, we talked about the difference between suggesting something and advising, like telling them in a sense. So all we can do is suggest, even to people we love, you know, we can only suggest. I think I mentioned to you the Douglas Harding quote. That's one of my favorite quotes about love.
I would love to hear it if you have it memorized.
Yeah,
I love
sure.
Douglas Harding.
Can't you see? I'm just a space for you to be.
Oh,
You
yes.
see? Do you see how
Yeah,
that times into it that connects with our discussion? The
absolutely.
word space isn't exactly right, but it's kind of that spiritual thing that's when you say namaste and you're saying that the God in me is like the God in you.
Yes. Yes.
So
So,
that's kind of, I'm answering your question. That's part of what I've
definitely.
learned. So I listen better now. And the artistic part is not like running around saying, look at me, look how wonderful I am, the way
Mhm.
it used to all the time and crashing into walls and causing all kinds of problems.
Oh, I relate so deeply with that. The effort that it takes to convince or to posture to make something of me for you, for me, it takes
Yes,
so much
Aaron,
energy.
I am Aaron. I have something special. And if you don't listen to it, you're an idiot.
Yes, or I'm an idiot.
Yeah, well, of course, but it's always coming back at us. When
Yes.
we point idiocy at others, it's us. We're being the idiot.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh, excellent, excellent answer. Yes. So I will acknowledge because you brought it up, and it's also very exciting that we have an upcoming Zoom book club, also hopefully an in-person as well, on this
I would
provocative.
love people. Yeah, let me just say a word about that.
Please
This
do.
isn't for everybody, but from my heart, I think that anybody who is sincere and reasonably intelligent and reasonably open will get a tremendous amount out of our book club talking about Bernardo, who we
Mhm.
both acknowledge is smarter than us, you
Yes,
know? And
yes,
so when you're talking about somebody that's smarter than you and you appreciate them, it makes it easier for everybody else to feel, well, I don't know much. Well, that's fine. You
yes.
know enough to want to learn. And that's beautiful.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we can take Bernardo's suggestions. He's not advising, he's
That's right.
suggesting.
Bernardo's not like making money on whether or not we decide to take one of his things up.
Exactly.
Although
Yes,
I will say his latest book is on sale for half price, just to give him a plug.
that's excellent to know. I'm going to have to order
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yes. So, this book that we will be offering to discuss with others who are also interested in this work is called More Than Allegory on Religious Myth, Truth, and Belief.
yeah,
And I will give some details at the very end of the podcast.
yeah. And let me
But
just say this about it without getting into too many details, of course.
please.
The last 60 pages
Mm.
have absolutely reinforced everything I learned from my last teacher who was not into philosophy at all. Okay, in
Mhm.
great detail, because as you know, I'm curious about all this kind of stuff, and it depends. It's just how we are. It doesn't make us better or worse. You are and I am, but the next person is not a big deal. It's absolutely reinforced everything, and
Mm.
it's given me a greater sense of what happens after death than I ever have had. Little teaser. We can't go into
Beautiful.
that now.
Yes, I agree
That operational
completely.
definition is probably 5 hours of discussion.
Yes, yes. And this book club, it may turn into an ongoing discussion, which would be a really great way to socialize curiosity.
Right. So if any of you who are listening and know anyone else about it, you can give the details. They can talk to me about it because it's one of the great joys of my life to share Bernardo. It's like sharing like the best fine wine.
Absolutely. Yes.
So it's just a
Yes.
joy to share.
Oh, lovely, lovely. And I'm curious because you said, your everything kind of came together with that last 60 pages from what
Yeah.
your teacher taught you who was not into philosophy. I'm just curious, what
Right.
what were they into? Was it math? Was
They were into freedom, spiritual freedom. And so spiritual freedom is like just total, the way I can put it, I think I mentioned this to you before, is like being so completely deeply in the here and now. And so while occasionally a little bit of the past or a little bit of the future comes flying through you, or a little bit of anger, he lives in India. So for example, if you've ever been in India, like driving in India is quite a challenge. So once in a while he'll want to go like. And he'll do that because he's an Italian from Jersey, so of course he'll do that. It's part of his programming, right? But what happens is a second later he's fine and he loves everybody again.
Ah,
You see? Do
that
you
is
see how that
great.
ties in with what Bernardo was talking about?
Yes, and
It's
true
like, for a
freedom.
second or two, we're ridiculously human, but it passes quickly because you're so in love with the present now. Because the question I had when I was younger, Aaron, is why does anything exist at all? And there's no answer. But the only answer is it's just now, you see,
Mm, mm,
you know.
mm. That is absolutely, that is an answer. It's
Yeah.
just now.
That's about as close as I can come to an answer.
Mhm,
Well,
mhm,
now there is, so I don't know.
mhm. This also brings me to just celebrate that the why really has been removed for me through these kinds of explorations. Because if there's now and living in this now, and then these, anger pops up or something, an irritation in my relationship comes up and then passes quickly. I used to be kind of caught in the hamster wheel of why,
Yes,
and
exactly.
and
Well
it's so
said.
much easier to just embrace what's happening with love when coming from
Yes.
the present experience, and it's
Yeah.
just less tense, a lot less tense.
And one of my poems, and one of the great things about poetry, by the way, if there's any autistic people out there, I'd love to help you write poetry because when you start writing in metaphor, you find answers you can't find anywhere else. The metaphors take over and they'll bring you to a different place. Anyway, one of my poems is called There's Never Been a Why.
Ooh, hoo, hoo, hoo. Ooh, hoo, hoo. So good.
And just
The
really
title says a
quickly, I don't
lot.
make any money from it, but there's for some reason, but my poetry's on Amazon. There's a book called Writing, R-I-D-I-N-G, The Spectrum. So this is not I'm not making a cent from it, but you can see a couple of poems free on it. So David Hutt, Amazon, Writing the Spectrum, if anyone's interested. And I'm really interested in working with the bright autistic kids who, like me, they're verbs living in a world of nouns. So that's really anyone, if you know anyone out there who's listening, please have them in touch with me. I'd love to work with them.
Yes, yes, yes. Wonderful. And we'll put your information or the information of how to look at that book in the caption for the video.
Great.
So glad
So
you.
we're about 7 minutes to go or so. So
So
you
I've got
tell me.
another question here, just a couple
Sure.
of short questions. One is that, so given your insights from this book, More Than Allegory and everything else,
Mhm.
specifically on the wave of possibilities,
Oh, yes. Thank you
how
for
do
bringing that
you
up.
understand quantum physics as a sort of
Yes.
God's laboratory?
So let me go back to what he said because he expresses it really well. Physicists have known experimentally, let me mention that. This quantum physics is a great science in that they've had thousands of replications of the same experiment, which is the best that science can do.
Mhm,
So in some ways, quantum physics is the best science mankind, womankind have ever created, have ever connected with.
mhm,
Okay? So they've known experimentally since the 1980s through hundreds and hundreds of experiments that the reality we perceive with our five senses isn't really definite and concrete until we observe it. Before observation, it consists of vague, ambiguous possibilities that we've come to call the quantum world. We're labeling something we don't know. And I
mhm.
wanted to mention this. This wave of possibilities, according to the book here, is the source and fuel of universal creativity and originality. So those folks out there who are very creative are living more in the quantum world than those who are more like the managerial class or, whatever. So you and I, Aaron, have lived in the quantum world before we knew what we could call it, you see? Without it, the cognitive activity would grind to a halt. There would be no novelty feeding it from below. How this wave gets filtered and then congeals into one particular reality or wave function collapse. Wow. Wave function collapse. It's
Mhm,
a major thing that people are trying to figure out for years.
mhm.
Depends on the belief system. Now, there you go. As we've talked about, Aaron, and the saying is like, sorry, get rid of it. Um, I'll see it when I believe it, and you know that it's like first I believe it, and then I can see it. And you and I know for our own perspective, as much as we can share with people, that that's how consciousness works. We don't, until we believe it, we won't see it. You know the saying, I'm from Missouri, show me? Well, we have a lot of people around that are from Missouri. And because they're from Missouri, they're missing out on the possibility of there being something besides the material world.
Very, very well said. I really appreciate that. And this is essentially exploring deconstructing belief. And the book is, and so is this podcast, in a way that can really help people, like help the world and help an individual experience. So,
And just to share, because I'm into music and whatever, the Grateful Dead, it's just a box of rain. I don't know who put it there. Believe it if you need it, or leave it if you dare.
Yes, it does take some courage. Yes, if you dare.
Yeah, and courage, without courage, you can't do the end of the spiritual journey
Mhm.
because you want to keep seeking because you don't know anything else. I don't mean you and people in general, seekers in general. So and they know they're kind of running out of fuel, but they feel like they have to keep seeking. It's also kind of like the Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy realizes she was always home all the time.
Yes, yes, exactly. Right. That past version hamster wheel I mentioned, it works with the future as well with that saying.
Yes. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Excellent. Okay, so last question is, so I'm just being with you, and I'm sure many listeners and reviewers can sense that there's a certain lightness around you. There is a freedom around you. I've experienced it. It's beautiful and inspiring.
Yeah,
So, what
thank you.
is your position of spiritual freedom, or how does the past and future come into your life these days? You said a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit. So my teacher called it holidays. So a holiday is, which is also a holy day, of course, that's what it
Mhm.
means also. A holiday is where just for this moment, everything gets let go. Everything lets let go. You're seeking who you are and everything. Okay. And you understand that you're always, ever, only here and now. And that everything else kind of comes and goes. And everything that comes and goes is not truth. Emotions aren't truth. These words aren't truth. Our conversation isn't truth. It comes and goes. What doesn't come and go is this. It's like a silence. Okay. And as you may know, we've talked about this, I think, silence contains all sounds.
Yes.
Silence is greater than all sounds. So the miracle of anything existing and living in that fully and living in this kind of natural gratitude and this natural freedom and this natural comfort and being willing to express like the Zen people, the Zen thinking, the words just come through you. They come through everybody. But what we do is because our egos and our human fears and all that, they block those words from coming through. So most of the time, the default position, that's what I wanted to say. The words finally came to me. So my default position is to just let words come through and trust the words more than I trust my outer self. Does that
Oh,
explain it pretty well?
absolutely. Yes,
My
absolutely.
outer self can make a lot of mistakes. You talk to Bev, she could spend an hour on all the things I do wrong, and she's right, but it doesn't matter. What does it matter? I can't help it. That's how we are. But the more and more that you live in this moment and you don't live for a teacher, but you have a bhakti sense, a love of truth. And when you love truth more than you love anything else, you realize you are truth, not in an egotistical way,
Hmm.
but you are truth, not in your form, not in your words, not in your relationships. You're the unformed, unimaginable truth.
Very beautifully spoken. I've got chills hearing you say this. I absolutely, I absolutely agree. And it is my wish for everyone to know this because
Yes.
it is
And you and
lovely.
I will work together on other projects, and hopefully we'll get that. The Bernardo book is really a great trigger for all of this because he's a great scientist, and people should know. He's both a great scientist who is very much did all kinds of material stuff most of his life, and and probably to me, the most eminent philosopher in the world today.
I
So pretty good combination.
absolutely agree. Yes. So I will be adding after this video the details on how you can have listeners can join this book club, no charge, just for
Right,
the
that's great.
sake of truth. And so just before we close, because operational definitions are so important, and you
Hmm.
just use the word truth quite a few times.
Yeah.
What we're saying is not truth, what we are is truth. Can you give a brief operational definition of
No, but I'm
truth?
going to share another like
Good,
the song thing.
great.
This is from the Moody Blues, one of my all-time favorite
Mm,
groups. Because the truth is hard to swallow. That's what the war of love is for.
mm, mm. Yeah, more chills. Very good answer. Yeah. Okay, so just to finish this up, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience? Any closing thoughts or a message for curious listeners out
I
there?
would say that if you only get a little bit of this, don't feel bad about it because I'm 77. And if I told you the mistakes I made in seeking and all that, I probably could fill like the encyclopedia, old encyclopedias. Whatever little bit you get from this half hour, don't worry about what you don't get. Just like, when I'm teaching a quantum physics class, I said the first thing I say, because it's for 55 plus people, I said, you already got an A plus, relax. So I'd like everybody listening to this to know they already got an A plus. You are where you need to be. That's where you are. It's fine. Don't worry about what you don't know. If you know you don't know, you're brilliant. That's all I want to say.
Thank you so much for joining me today, joining
It's
us
been
today,
great, Erin.
David. It's been so great. I'm so excited to work more with you. I really feel like we're doing as good as we can with what we
Yeah,
can. So thank you
great
so much.
talking to you.
Yes, thanks for joining us. And
You're welcome.
yes, bye, David. Bye,
Bye.
everyone. Hello again. So this is obviously a little after I met with David, but I do have the details here if you would like to join in our book discussion, which is open to the public, free of charge, on Bernardo Kastrup's book, More Than Allegory on Religious Myth, Truth, and Belief. An incredible book. Highly, highly recommend more than any book that I've read. And the details for this meeting are on the website, wholenesswisdom.com, in the information tab. And just to say here, this Zoom book discussion will be on January 24th at 12 p.m. Eastern. And if you'd like to join this group, please go to wholenesswisdom.com in the information tab just to RSVP so I can give you the Zoom link. And again, this is a discussion between everyone who attends on their insights and perspectives and our insights and perspectives on this amazing book, More Than Allegory. It is available on Kindle, through audiobook platforms, and is also very affordable on Amazon. Again, more than